I had just returned from Florence after securing $1 million wine distribution deal when I discovered my brother, who had never even participated in a harvest, had been appointed CEO. He once called Nebbiolo just regular purple grapes. Now he was the face of the brand I had painstakingly built. I didn't get angry. I simply took back my personal customer notebook and left. But they would call me back when they lost everything I had held together. The early morning Sonoma fog was still clinging to the hillsides as my rental car climbed the familiar winding road to Marchesi Hills estate. After 3 weeks in Italy finalizing what could be our most significant European distribution deal to date, all I wanted was a shower, strong coffee, and perhaps a moment to savor the victory before diving back into work. The Bertolucci Restaurant Group had finally agreed to feature our Reserve Cabernet as their premium pour across 37 high-end establishments throughout northern Italy, a breakthrough that had taken me 2 years of relationship building to secure. I hadn't even called ahead to announce my return. There was something satisfying about the thought of walking into the Monday morning staff meeting with the signed contracts, seeing the surprise on everyone's faces, especially my father's. Francesco Marchesi had never been one for emotional displays, but a deal of this magnitude might finally earn me more than his standard acknowledging nod. The estate looked exactly as I had left it, the rows of vines stretching across the rolling hills like meticulously placed stitches on green velvet. The stone buildings with their terracotta roofs nestled amid cypress trees. It was mid-May, and the vines were showing their first real growth after bud break. We were heading into another promising season, our 28th since my parents had purchased this land and planted the first vines. I parked in my usual spot near the administrative building and noticed several unfamiliar luxury cars in the visitors section. Perhaps the Vino Quarterly photographer had finally arrived for the feature they'd been planning. I'd have to touch base with Sophia, our PR director, to make sure they captured the estate's best angles. As I walked toward the main entrance, suitcase in one hand and the leather portfolio containing the Bertolucci contracts in the other, I was struck by an odd sensation, the kind of dissonance you feel when something in a familiar setting is subtly out of place. The staff I passed seemed to avoid eye contact, their good mornings oddly strained. When I pushed open the door to the main conference room where our Monday meetings were always held, I understood why. There, at the head of the long oak table where I typically sat, was my younger brother Marco, dressed in a suit I didn't recognize, gesturing animatedly to a group of people who were definitely not our regular staff. My father sat to his right, nodding along, while my mother, Elena Sr., watched from the other end with a tense smile. And that's why the new direction for Marchesi Hills will focus on accessibility without sacrificing our heritage quality, Marco was saying, his voice carrying that salesmanship lilt he'd picked up during his brief stint in tech startups. We're targeting a younger demographic while maintaining. He stopped mid-sentence when the door closed behind me with a definitive click. The room fell silent as every head turned in my direction. Elena. My mother was the first to recover, rising halfway from her chair. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I stood frozen, the portfolio clutched against my chest like armor. I caught an earlier flight, I said, my voice sounding oddly distant to my own ears. What's going on here? Marco flashed that easy smile he'd been using to charm his way out of trouble since he was 5. Surprise, I was just briefing our new marketing team on the vision going forward. New marketing team. I looked at the unfamiliar faces around the table. Where's Sophia and David? Our marketing director of 7 years. My father cleared his throat. Elena, perhaps we should discuss this privately after the meeting. I ignored him, turning to the strangers. Would you excuse us for a moment? Family matter. My tone made it clear this wasn't a request. The newcomers exchanged glances before gathering their tablets and notebooks. As they filed out, I caught fragments of whispered conversation. Didn't know she was back. Nels thought he said she was stepping away. When the door closed behind the last of them, I set my suitcase aside but kept the portfolio clutched in my hand. Someone want to tell me what's happening here. Marco stood, buttoning his jacket with the practiced gesture of someone who'd recently learned how important such details were in business settings. I was going to call you today, actually. The board made some changes while you were in Italy. The board? I looked at my father. You mean, you made some changes? My father, Francesco Marchesi, had the decency to look uncomfortable, even as he maintained his authoritative posture. At 68, he still carried himself with the rigid discipline of someone who had built something from nothing and wouldn't apologize for the decisions that preserved it. It was a unanimous decision, he said. Marco has been bringing some fresh perspectives that the board feels will help us modernize. Modernize, the word tasted bitter. We just had our most profitable year in the estate's history. I've expanded our distribution network across 3 continents. I've increased our critical ratings across every varietal. What exactly needs modernizing? Marco jumped in. The branding, for one. Our market research shows we're perceived as traditional to the point of being stodgy. We need to appeal to newer wine drinkers, not just the established connoisseurs. Newer wine drinkers, I repeated. You mean the ones who couldn't tell a Nebbiolo from a Syrah if their lives depended on it? The ones you want to aim for with what was it you called our Reserve Red 2 Christmases ago? Too heavy and smelly. That's not fair, Elena, my mother interjected. Marco has been studying the business. He's taken some courses. Courses? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. I have 20 years of experience in every aspect of this business. I've worked harvest since I was 19. I developed our entire export strategy. I personally cultivated relationships with every major distributor and critic who matters. And we appreciate that foundation, Marco said smoothly. But the industry is changing. We need fresh approaches, digital strategies, lifestyle branding. You failed at a cold-pressed juice startup, I cut in. A venture that lost $2 million of family money before folding. And now you're an expert on beverage marketing. My father stood now, his patience visibly thinning. That's enough, Elena. The decision has been made. Marco is taking over as CEO. You'll remain as head of international distribution. Of course, reporting to him. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I steadied myself against the back of a chair. I'm to report to Marco. It's still a senior position, my mother said quickly. Your expertise in that area is invaluable. Invaluable, but not valued enough to consult me before this restructuring. I looked between my parents, searching for some sign that this was all an elaborate misunderstanding. I was gone for 3 weeks. 3 weeks to close the biggest European deal in our history. I held up the portfolio. The Bertolucci contract. 37 locations. Guaranteed purchases of 6,000 cases annually for 3 years. There was a flicker of something surprise, respect, possibly regret in my father's eyes. But it vanished quickly. That's excellent work, Elena. See, your role remains crucial. Marco stepped forward, hand outstretched. Let me see what you've negotiated. I should review the terms before final approval. That was the moment something broke inside me, a clean, silent fracture. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not malice but entitlement. He genuinely believed he deserved this position, that his ideas undoubtedly gleaned from business podcasts and trend reports somehow outweighed my 2 decades of hands-on experience and relationship building. Without a word, I slid the portfolio back into my attaché case and snapped it shut. Elena. My father's voice carried a warning. Don't make this difficult. I met his gaze directly. I'm not making anything difficult. I'm simply recognizing when I'm no longer needed in the capacity I've been serving. Don't be dramatic, Marco said. Of course you're needed. This is a family business. You're family. Am I? Because families typically don't make life-altering decisions about a member's career while they're away closing multi-million-dollar deals. My mother stood now too, her hands fluttering anxiously. Elena, please. Let's all calm down and discuss this rationally. I am completely rational, I replied, my voice steady. And I'm making a rational decision based on the information presented. I picked up my suitcase. I'll clear my office today. My father's expression hardened. You're overreacting. Take some time to think before you do something you'll regret. I paused at the door and looked back at the three of them: my father, stern and unmovable; my mother, worried but unwilling to challenge him; and Marco, already settling back into the chair at the head of the table, my chair, with an expression caught between triumph and uncertainty. "The only thing I regret," I said quietly, "is believing that my contributions to this company would ever be valued above birthright and gender." I didn't wait for their response. My office was exactly as I'd left it 3 weeks ago: organized, functional, with personal touches that were meaningful rather than decorative. The wall of framed press clippings and awards that chronicled Marquise Hill's rise to prominence under my guidance. The shelf of soil samples from each of our vineyard blocks, labeled and dated. The calendar marked with distributor meetings, wine competitions, and harvest projections for the next 18 months. I had built this business as surely as if I'd planted each vine with my own hands. While my father had provided the land and initial investment, and my mother had contributed her family's old-world winemaking knowledge, I was the one who had transformed Marquise Hills from a respectable local winery into an internationally recognized brand. And now I was being asked to step aside for Marco, who had shown no interest in the business until recently, whose knowledge of wine extended to whatever would impress his dates, who had once memorably complained that harvest season interfered with his Aspen ski trip plans. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, methodically forwarding crucial emails to my personal account. Then I began collecting the items that were truly mine: the leather-bound notebook containing my personal notes on distributor preferences and peculiarities; the contact information for buyers I'd cultivated through personal connections rather than official channels; the flash drive with my private label project that I'd been developing on the side. There was a soft knock at the door. I didn't look up. "Come in." It was Sophia, our PR director or former PR director, apparently. Her expression was a mixture of sympathy and discomfort. "Elena, I just heard you were back. And about everything." I continued gathering my things. "When did you find out?" "3 days ago. They called us all in for an announcement." She hesitated. "I handed in my resignation this morning." That made me pause. "You didn't have to do that." Sophia shrugged. "The new team they brought in, they're talking about Instagram-worthy label designs and wine coolers, actual wine coolers, Elena, with flavor infusions." She shuddered dramatically, which almost made me smile despite everything. "Where will you go?" I asked. "I have some calls out. Davis family offered me something last year. I might see if that's still available." She leaned against the doorframe. "What about you? You're not really leaving, are you? This place is you." I closed my laptop and unplugged it. "Not anymore, apparently." "But your father will come around. He always listens to you eventually." I shook my head. "Not this time. This isn't a disagreement about harvest timing or barrel selection. This is—" I gestured vaguely, unable to fully articulate the betrayal. "This is them telling me that despite everything I've achieved, I will always be second choice." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "What will you do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I have options." She nodded. "Well, when you figure it out, call me. Wherever you go, I'd follow you in a heartbeat." She straightened up. "I should go finish clearing my desk. The new PR team is starting tomorrow." After she left, I continued my methodical packing. I was nearly finished when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Where are you? Your father wants to continue our discussion." I didn't respond. Instead, I gathered my belongings into a single box and my laptop bag, took one last look around the office that had been my second home for nearly 2 decades, and walked out. As I passed the conference room, I could hear Marco's voice again, animated and confident, laying out his vision to the newly reassembled group. I didn't stop. In the parking lot, I loaded my things into the rental car and slid into the driver's seat. For a moment, I sat perfectly still, hands gripping the steering wheel, waiting for the wave of emotion to crest: anger, hurt, fear, uncertainty. But what came instead was a strange clarity. They had made their choice. Now I would make mine. I started the car and drove away from Marquise Hill's estate without looking back. The cottage in Sonoma Valley had been an impulse purchase 3 years ago, a small, neglected property adjacent to an abandoned vineyard that I'd helped restore through a local agricultural preservation fund. I'd renovated it as a weekend retreat, a place to decompress away from the constant demands of the estate. Now it would serve as my refuge while I figured out my next steps. It was simple but comfortable, with a wraparound porch that offered views of the neighboring vineyards, a kitchen designed for someone who takes cooking seriously, and a small office where I could work if needed. Most importantly, very few people knew about it. I'd kept the purchase private, sensing even then that I might someday need a space that was entirely my own. I spent the first day in a fog, sleeping off jet lag and emotional exhaustion. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from my family, but I silenced it without reading any of them. Whatever they had to say, I wasn't ready to hear it. On the second day, I made coffee and took it out to the porch, watching the morning light spread across the valley. For the first time in years, I had no schedule to follow, no crisis to manage, no meetings to prepare for. The freedom was as terrifying as it was liberating. By afternoon, restlessness set in. I had spent my entire adult life in constant motion, solving problems, building relationships, driving growth. Stillness felt unnatural. I opened my laptop and began to make lists, contacts I could reach out to, opportunities I might pursue, knowledge I possessed that others would value. The wine industry was all I knew. But within it, my expertise was comprehensive. I understood the production side from vineyard to bottle. I knew marketing, distribution, export regulations for a dozen countries. I had relationships with critics, buyers, and competitors across multiple continents. I was also, I realized, unreasonably angry. Not the hot, immediate anger of that first moment in the conference room, but something deeper and colder. Anger at having my contributions dismissed. Anger at the realization that no matter how much value I created, I would always be viewed as secondary in my father's eyes. I closed the laptop. Planning my next move from a place of anger would only lead to decisions I might regret. I needed to process this betrayal first, to understand it and move past it. So I did something I hadn't done since college, absolutely nothing. I took long walks through the neighboring vineyards, observing the differences in trellising systems and canopy management. I cooked elaborate meals just for myself. I read books that had been gathering dust on my nightstand for months. I opened exceptional bottles of wine competitors' wines, mostly, and took detailed tasting notes out of habit. The calls and messages continued. After a week, I finally listened to some of the voicemails. My mother: "Elena, please call us. Your father didn't mean to upset you so much. We can discuss your role in the company." My father: "This behavior is unprofessional and childish. You have responsibilities. Call me immediately." Marco: "Hey sis, I know you're probably still mad, but let's talk this out. I value your experience. Seriously. We can make this work as a team." Sophia: "It's a shit show here already. Marco hired a wine influencer as a consultant. She suggested we make our labels more millennial pink. I'm drinking heavily tonight if you want to join." I deleted them all without responding. 2 weeks after my abrupt departure, I was sitting on the porch with my morning coffee when my personal phone rang, not the number my family had, but the one I reserved for industry contacts. The caller ID showed Jean-Michel Renaud, head sommelier for La Maison, a 3-star Michelin restaurant in San Francisco and one of our most prestigious accounts. "Jean-Michel," I answered, surprised. "How are you?" "Elena, ma chère, I've been trying to reach you through the usual channels without success." His French accent remained pronounced despite decades in California. "Are you well?" "I'm taking some personal time," I said carefully. "Is there something I can help you with?" There was a slight pause. "I suppose you could say I'm calling for clarification. We received a rather unusual communication from Marquise Hills yesterday. Something about a rebranding initiative and new portfolio options. I closed my eyes briefly. I'm no longer with the company. Jean-Michel? I'm afraid I can't speak to their current initiatives. You've left. He sounded genuinely shocked. But you are Marchese Hills. Your brother, he is the one who sent this email. He's involved now. He's the new CEO, I confirmed, keeping my tone neutral. Mon Dieu. Another pause. The email mentioned something called Marchese Sparkle, a wine spritzer, I believe, and suggested we might feature it as a pairing with our seafood courses. Despite everything, I couldn't suppress a short laugh. Did it really? Indeed. Along with the low-intervention Chardonnay they're planning to release, I was confused by this direction. Low intervention was a polite industry term for wines made with minimal technological or chemical interference, often a cover for lazy winemaking, passed off as natural and authentic. In skilled hands, the approach could yield complex, terroir-driven wines. In inexperienced hands, it usually meant unstable, flawed products with inconsistent quality. I see, was all I said. Elena. Jean-Michel's voice turned serious. We have featured Marchese Hills wines for 9 years. Your reserve Cabernet has been our premium pour by the glass for the past 3. But if the quality and direction is changing, I should have reassured him. The professional thing, the ethical thing, would have been to defend the winery regardless of my personal situation. But something stopped me. Not spite, but honesty. I can't speak to what their quality will be going forward. Jean-Michel, I'm truly sorry. He sighed. I understand. Well, we have sufficient stock of the vintages you oversaw to last a few months. After that, we shall have to reevaluate. He paused again. And you? What will you do now? I haven't decided yet. When you do, please let me know. Your expertise is too valuable to be lost to our industry. His tone warmed. And perhaps we can have dinner soon as friends rather than business associates for once. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, turning the conversation over in my mind. Jean-Michel's reaction confirmed what I had suspected. Marco's fresh approach was already alienating our core customer base. It wasn't satisfaction I felt at this realization, but a strange, hollow vindication. I wondered how many other accounts were receiving similar communications. How many were responding with the same confusion and concern? How long it would take before the damage became evident in the sales figures. That evening, I received my first email from outside my family, a message from Anton Kelleher, owner of Kelleher Vineyards, one of our main competitors in the region and someone I'd known professionally for years. Heard you've parted ways with the family business, he wrote. If you're considering your options, I'd love to discuss some possibilities. No pressure, just an open door. I closed the email without responding, but the fact of it lingered. Word was spreading. People were taking notice. The industry was small, and news, especially surprising news, traveled fast. Over the next few days, similar messages arrived from other wineries, distributors, even a wine technology startup looking for an advisor. I filed them all away without commitment. I wasn't ready to align myself with another vineyard, to pour my expertise into building someone else's dream. 3 weeks after my departure, Sophia called. You would not believe what's happening here, she said without preamble when I picked up. I thought you resigned. I did. But I'm working my notice period. 2 more days of this circus, then sweet freedom. She lowered her voice. Bertolucci canceled the contract. I sat up straighter. What? Yep. Apparently, Marco sent them the new marketing materials as a courtesy. They responded by pulling out of the deal entirely. $6 million over 3 years, gone. I closed my eyes, feeling a complex mix of emotions. That contract had been my crowning achievement, the result of countless dinners, tastings, relationship-building conversations. Did they say why? Marco showed me the email. The Bertolucci wine director said, and I quote, The new branding direction suggests a fundamental shift in product philosophy that no longer aligns with our premium positioning. In other words, your brother made our wine look like a detox juice brand, and they want nothing to do with it. I shouldn't have asked my next question, but I couldn't help myself. How did my father take it? Sophia's voice dropped even lower. He doesn't know yet. Marco's been trying to salvage it before telling him. But it's a lost cause. Bertolucci already signed with Silverado for their premium pour. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of wine ironically. A Marchesi Hills Reserve Cabernet from the vintage I was most proud of, and took it out to the porch. The sun was setting over the valley, painting the vineyards in gold and amber. It was the kind of view we featured in our marketing materials, the kind that sold not just wine, but an entire experience, a connection to land and tradition and craftsmanship. Marco didn't understand that. He saw wine as a product category, not a cultural artifact. He thought he could apply the same marketing principles that sold athleisure wear or subscription boxes to a product that people had emotional and sometimes even spiritual connections to. My phone buzzed with a text. My mother again. Family dinner Sunday. Please come. We miss you. I set the phone down without responding and sipped my wine, watching the light fade from the sky. The following Sunday, against my better judgment, I found myself driving toward my parents' home, not the estate, but the house in St. Helena where I'd grown up, a tastefully updated Victorian with a sprawling garden that my mother tended personally despite having access to the estate's landscaping crew. I had finally responded to my mother's text with a terse, "What time?" Her immediate reply suggested she'd been waiting by her phone. 6 p.m., just family, your favorite risotto. It was manipulative, mentioning the wild mushroom risotto she knew I loved but rarely made because of the time involved. Still, after nearly a month of silence, I was curious enough about the state of things to accept the invitation. I arrived deliberately 10 minutes late, parking on the street rather than in the driveway. A small act of defiance, signaling I wouldn't be staying long. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her face lighting up with a smile that couldn't quite hide her anxiety. "Elena, you came." She embraced me tightly, then held me at arm's length to examine me. "You look thin. Have you been eating properly?" "I'm fine, Mom." I handed her the bottle of wine I'd brought, not a Marchesi Hills, but a comparable Cabernet from a respected Napa producer. A small statement that didn't go unnoticed, judging by the flicker in her eyes. Come in, everyone's in the dining room, dinner's almost ready." The house smelled wonderful, the earthy aroma of mushrooms, the richness of toasting rice and good stock, the background notes of garlic and herbs. Despite myself, I felt a pang of nostalgia for family meals here, for the times when things had been simpler. In the dining room, my father sat at the head of the table, looking older than I remembered. Marco stood by the window, phone in hand, dressed more casually than he had been at the office, but still clearly making an effort with his appearance. Both men looked up as I entered. "Elena." My father nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "Good of you to join us." Marco pocketed his phone and stepped forward with an uncertain smile. "Hey, sis, you look good. Vacation agrees with you." "It's not a vacation," I said coolly, taking a seat across from where he'd obviously been sitting, judging by the half-empty wine glass. "I've left the company. There's a difference." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only when my mother bustled in with a basket of bread. 5 more minutes on the risotto. "Francesco, open Elena's wine." "Please." My father examined the bottle I'd brought, his eyebrows rising slightly at the producer. Without comment, he opened it and poured a glass for each of us. We went through the motions of clinking glasses and tasting, a ritual so ingrained in our family that we performed it automatically even in this strained atmosphere. "How have you been spending your time?" my father asked finally, his tone suggesting he was making an effort at normal conversation. Considering my options, I replied, "I've had several interesting offers." Marco looked up sharply. "From who?" I smiled slightly. Competitors, distributors, consultancies. Word travels fast in this industry. My mother returned with the risotto, setting the large serving dish in the center of the table with a flourish. There we are, Elena's favorite, just like I promised. It looked perfect, creamy but not too loose, studded with wild mushrooms, the aroma rich and inviting. I realized I was genuinely hungry, having eaten sparsely all day in anticipation of this meal. As we served ourselves and began to eat, the conversation remained superficial: comments about the food, observations about the unseasonably warm weather, my mother's updates about distant relatives I barely remembered. No one mentioned the winery directly, creating the illusion that we were just a normal family having a Sunday dinner. It wasn't until we'd finished the main course that my father cleared his throat meaningfully. Elena, your mother and I, all of us, we think it's time you came back to the estate. I set down my wine glass carefully. In what capacity? Your previous role, of course, he said, as if it were obvious. Head of International Distribution. Reporting to Marco. My father's jaw tightened. The organizational structure has been established. I see. I looked at Marco, who was studying his plate with sudden interest. And how are things going under the new leadership? I heard Bertolucci canceled their contract. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother looked between Marco and my father in confusion. What contract? Marco's head snapped up. How did you see the European distribution deal? I said, addressing my mother. The one I spent 2 years negotiating, $6 million over 3 years. Apparently, they weren't impressed with the new branding direction. My father turned to Marco, his expression hardening. You told me there were some concerns, but you were handling it. Marco flushed. I was going to tell you once I'd fixed it. Fixed it? I couldn't help the edge in my voice. Bertolucci already signed with Silverado. That relationship is burned. This is exactly why we need you back, my mother interjected, reaching across to touch my hand. These relationships are built on trust, on personal connections, the distributors, the buyers, they know you, Elena. They trust your judgment. I withdrew my hand gently. So you want me back to salvage the relationships Marco is damaging, but still report to him? My father's expression darkened further. This attitude isn't helpful. The decision about leadership has been made. We're offering you a way to be part of the family business again. On your terms, I noted. But I have terms of my own now. Marco leaned forward. Like what? I took a sip of wine, gathering my thoughts. I had come here expecting a family dinner, perhaps some awkward conversation, but not a negotiation. Yet here we were. And I suddenly realized I had more leverage than they knew. I have a list, I said finally, of accounts that are likely reviewing their relationship with Marchese Hills as we speak. Premium restaurants, distributors, export partners. Accounts I built personally, who deal with us primarily because of their relationship with me. My father's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening us? I'm stating facts, I replied calmly. In the past month, I've received calls or messages from 14 major accounts expressing concern about the direction of the winery. I've neither encouraged nor discouraged their concerns. I've simply stated that I'm no longer with the company. Marco paled slightly. Which accounts? I smiled thinly. That would be telling. My mother looked distressed. Elena, this isn't like you. We're family. We should be working together, not against each other. I agree, I said, softening my tone slightly for her benefit. Which is why I'm willing to return, but as co-CEO with Marco, with clear division of responsibilities. I'll handle production, quality control, and distributor relationships. Marco can focus on the marketing and lifestyle branding he's so passionate about, with the understanding that all major branding decisions require mutual agreement. Marco started to protest, but my father raised a hand to silence him. And if we refuse these terms, I met his gaze steadily. Then I'll accept one of the offers I've received, and I'll take my relationships with me. It won't be spite, Dad. It will be business. The tension in the room was palpable. My mother looked close to tears. Marco appeared caught between anger and fear, and my father's face had become an unreadable mask. "We built this business as a legacy for both of you," he said finally. "Not for you to tear apart with ultimatums." "No," I corrected gently. "You built the foundation. I built the business as it exists today. The relationships, the reputation, the quality standards, those are my legacy. And I won't see them dismantled by someone who thinks wine is just another beverage category." Marco pushed his chair back abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're making it sound like I'm some clueless outsider. I grew up in this business too." "Growing up around a business isn't the same as building it," I replied. "When was the last time you participated in a harvest? Can you explain our oak regime to a critic? Do you know why we use different yeasts for different vineyard blocks? Can you name our top 3 distributors in each market?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. My father sighed heavily. "What exactly are you proposing, Elena, in detail?" I laid it out clearly, co-CEO titles with distinct areas of responsibility. A 35% ownership stake for me up from the 20% I currently held. Final approval rights on all product decisions. Marco would remain the public face for marketing purposes if he wished, but operational decisions within my areas would be mine alone. 35%, Marco protested. "That's more than I have." "It reflects my contribution to the company's current value," I said simply. My mother looked to my father, whose expression had become calculating. He was a businessman first, always had been. And I could see him weighing the cost of my terms against the potential losses if I walked away completely. "We'll need to discuss this privately," he said finally. "As a family, and with the board." I nodded and stood. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, I'll be pursuing other opportunities." I kissed my mother's cheek. "Thank you for dinner. The risotto was perfect, as always." As I walked to the door, my father called after me. "Elena, these other opportunities, how serious are they?" I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "Kelleher offered me Chief Operating Officer, with equity. Vista Ridge wants me as their Director of Winemaking. And 3 distributors have approached me about developing a private label program." I looked back at him. "I have options, Dad. For the first time, I'm not bound by loyalty to Marquise Hills." The flash of alarm in his eyes told me more than any words could have. He hadn't expected me to walk away. He had assumed that family ties and 2 decades of investment would keep me tethered to the business regardless of how I was treated. He had miscalculated badly. I left without waiting for a response, the evening air cool against my flushed skin. As I drove away, I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, only a calm certainty that I had done what was necessary to protect both my interests and, ironically, the future of Marquise Hills itself. 2 days later, I received a call from my father requesting a meeting at a neutral location, a private tasting room at Domaine Chandon that we sometimes used for business discussions away from the estate. I agreed, setting the time for late afternoon. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in what Sophia used to call my power outfit. A tailored, charcoal suit that projected authority without trying too hard, paired with minimal jewelry and comfortable but elegant heels. Negotiation attire. Battle armor. The tasting room was empty when I arrived, but a bottle of Chandon's Reserve sparkling wine was chilling in an ice bucket, with 4 glasses arranged beside it, so the entire family would be present. I took a seat facing the door and waited. They arrived together, my father leading, followed by my mother and Marco. The dynamic was immediately clear. This was a united front, a family decision. Whether that was good or bad for my position remained to be seen. Elena. My father nodded in greeting as he took the seat across from me. My mother smiled tentatively, while Marco hovered uncertainly before sitting down. I noticed he'd dressed more formally today, in a suit that actually fit him properly, rather than the slightly too trendy cuts he usually favored. Someone had been coaching him. "Shall we?" My father gestured to the sparkling wine. I nodded, allowing him this small ceremony. He opened the bottle with practiced ease and poured for each of us. We went through the motions of tasting the observation of color and effervescence. the appreciation of the aroma, the contemplative first sip. Excellent structure, my father commented. The 2019 is showing beautifully. The dosage is higher than I prefer, I replied. But yes, it's well made. A small negotiation even in this exchange, him offering approval, me qualifying it. The dance we'd been performing my entire professional life. He set his glass down and folded his hands on the table. We've considered your terms. I waited, saying nothing. In negotiations, silence often achieved more than words. Some of them are acceptable, he continued. Others require modification. I'm listening. He outlined their counteroffer. The co-CEO arrangement would be structured as a 1-year transition period, after which there would be a board review. My ownership stake would increase to 30%, not 35%. I would have authority over production and international distribution, but domestic marketing would remain solely under Marco's control. When he finished, I took a slow sip of my wine before responding. The transition period suggests you see this as temporary. I don't. This is a permanent restructuring that reflects my value to the company. Nothing in business is permanent, my father countered. Circumstances change, markets evolve. Then let's tie the arrangement to performance metrics, I suggested. If the divisions under my control meet or exceed targets, my position remains secure. The same for Marco's areas. My mother, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. This shouldn't be a competition between you two. You should be working together. We will be, I assured her, but with clear accountability. Marco shifted uncomfortably. And the ownership stake? 35% stands, I said firmly. That puts me equal with Dad as the largest shareholder, which reflects reality. I've built as much of this company as he has, just in different ways. My father's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Marco surprised me. I'm okay with that, he said. With Elena at 35%. We all turned to look at him. He shrugged, looking uncharacteristically serious. It's true. She's been there from the beginning. Really? I came in late. He glanced at me. I still think we need to modernize certain aspects, but I know I don't have Elena's experience with the production side or the existing distributor relationships. My father looked between us, calculation visible in his eyes. 33%. For both of you. I retain 34. Your mother keeps her existing 10. No single person has controlling interest. It was a shrewd compromise, one that maintained his position as the deciding vote in any deadlock while acknowledging both Marco and me as near equals. I considered it for a moment, then nodded. Acceptable. With the performance metrics clause for the co-CEO arrangement. And final product approval requires agreement from both of you, my mother added unexpectedly. Neither can overrule the other on new releases or quality standards. We spent the next hour hammering out details: how decisions would be made, how responsibilities would be divided, how disputes would be resolved. It was the most honest conversation our family had had about the business in years, possibly ever. My father, once he accepted the new reality, became practical and solutions-oriented. Marco, to my surprise, listened more than he spoke, occasionally asking clarifying questions that suggested he was taking this seriously. By the time we finished the bottle of sparkling wine, we had the framework of an agreement that all of us could live with. Not perfect from anyone's perspective, but workable, sustainable. As we prepared to leave, my father held me back with a light touch on my arm. A word, Elena. The others continued toward the door, giving us privacy. I underestimated you, he said simply. I met his gaze. Yes, you did. You would really have walked away, joined Kelleher or one of the others. In a heartbeat, I confirmed. I value what we've built. Dad. But I won't be undervalued in return. He nodded slowly. Your grandfather, my father, he always said I was too traditional in my thinking, too bound by old ways. A hint of a smile touched his lips. He would have approved of how you handled this. It was as close to an apology as Francesco Marchesi was capable of giving. I accepted it with a nod of my own. "I'll see you Monday," I said. "We should address the staff together, explain the new structure." "Yes," he agreed. A united front. As I drove back to my cottage that evening, I felt neither victorious nor defeated, just resolute. I had forced a necessary change, one that recognized my contributions and secured my position going forward. It wasn't about ego, it was about building something sustainable, something that honored both tradition and innovation. The road ahead wouldn't be smooth. Marco and I would clash over decisions, inevitably. The damage to certain distributor relationships would take time to repair. The ill-conceived Marchesi Sparkle concept would need to be quietly shelved, but Marchesi Hills would survive, and perhaps emerge stronger for having confronted these tensions directly. I stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the valley, the vineyards laid out below like a patchwork quilt in the fading light. This land, these vines, this legacy they were worth fighting for. Not just my family's legacy, but my own. My phone buzzed with a text. "Sophia. Heard the news. You're back as co-CEO. Badass move. Is my job still open?" I smiled and typed a response. "Report Monday at 9. We have a lot of cleanup to do." Another text arrived, this one from my mother. "Your old room is still here if you want to move back to the estate." I considered it for a moment before replying, "Thanks, but I'll keep my cottage. Some independence is good for all of us." The final text of the evening came as I was unlocking the door to my cottage. "Marco. Any chance we could meet tomorrow, just us? I have some ideas I want to run by you before Monday." I hesitated, then responded, "Breakfast at Meadowood. 8 a.m. Bring market research, not just ideas." His reply was immediate. "Already compiling data. See you there." I stepped onto my porch and looked up at the stars scattered across the night sky. The world of wine was built on balance between tradition and innovation, between science and art, between independence and interconnection. Perhaps our family business needed to find that same balance. I had nearly lost everything I'd worked for. Instead, I had forced a reckoning that might ultimately save it, not just for me, but for all of us. 2 months later, I sat on a familiar hillside at Marchesi Hills Estate, watching the sunset over the vineyards. The vines were heavy with fruit now, the grapes beginning to change color in veraison, promising another excellent harvest. The evening air carried the scent of dry earth and ripening fruit, the essence of late summer in wine country. The transition hadn't been seamless. There had been awkward moments as staff adjusted to the new dual leadership structure. Some of Marco's initiatives had been scaled back or redesigned. Some of my traditional approaches had been updated. We had lost a few accounts permanently, but retained most and even added some new ones attracted by the publicity surrounding our modernization with respect for tradition, the carefully crafted narrative Sophia had developed to explain the leadership changes. Bertolucci remained with Silverado for now, but their wine director had agreed to a meeting next quarter to discuss a potential return to Marchesi Hills. "We value the relationship," he'd written in his email to me, "and we appreciate a brand that can evolve while maintaining its core integrity." My phone buzzed with a text message. I expected it to be work-related, a question about the upcoming harvest schedule, perhaps, or an update on the new labels that blended Marco's modern aesthetic with our traditional brand elements. Instead, it was from my mother. "Sunday dinner, just family. No business talk." I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months, and typed my reply, "I'll be there. I'll bring the wine." As the last light faded from the sky, I thought about journeys, the ones we plan and the ones thrust upon us. I had nearly lost everything that mattered to me professionally. Instead, I had found a new path forward, one that honored both my contributions and the family legacy. The path ahead would never be entirely smooth. Marco and I would continue to see things differently, to negotiate and compromise. My father would never fully relinquish his vision of how things should be done. But we had found a balance that worked, that allowed each of us to contribute our strengths while compensating for our weaknesses. In the end, perhaps that was the true success, not the sales figures or critical acclaim or distribution deals, but the creation of something sustainable, something that could adapt and evolve while remaining true to its core values. I stood and brushed the dirt from my jeans, taking one last look at the vineyard stretching into the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to build on what we had created. For now, though, I simply savored the moment, the cool evening air, the silent vines heavy with promise, the knowledge that I had fought for my place and won not just position, but respect. That, I realized, was worth more than any title could ever be.